Initially, everyone considered it a simple stone. Without doubt, it was given a dull catalog name, Tri-I, Atlas, and perceived as yet another fragment arriving from the emptiness of space. Cold, dead, completely meaningless. It seemed to be just a random cosmic object. But Tri-I, Atlas, was not going to follow the established rules. His physical characteristics did not match. His behavior trajectory was strange, and there were too many unexplained deviations. His internal radiation pulsed in an unnatural rhythm, almost like a clock. This was the first alarming signal, and then we directed our best observational tool at it, Webb, our eye in the universe. What it transmitted to us was not just images. It became a true revolution in our understanding, because beneath the layers of ice inside this structure, we discovered something more. Architecture, not random shapes, but a designed space. It was a blueprint, mathematically conceived, with repeating patterns and straight angles. We saw not just a reflection, but a grid resembling a blueprint. Walls, corridors, cavities, all of this looked like a city map, or, from the perspective of fundamentals, like a motherboard. Thus, the question is no longer what it is, but who designed it and why it moves through our system. Let's sort it out step by step. At first, he was just observed, the third interstellar guest. Interesting, but when Webb activated the infrared sensors, everything changed. He recorded thermal signatures, but they were not evenly distributed across the surface like a regular asteroid. They originated from precisely defined points that perfectly matched the geometric grid. Long corridors, intersections at right angles, symmetrical compartments. The scientists initially thought it was a sensor malfunction, but the data kept coming, and the signal was clear. This is not noise, but a designed structure. Modular, as if someone used the same element and just repeated it over and over. A very efficient method from a production standpoint. You don't encounter this in nature. Engineers do this. But the most astonishing thing is the warmth. Impulses emanate from specific zones. These are not the natural heat of the core, but localized, actively working energy sources. They resemble thermal emissions from reactors or life support systems. We observe fluctuations that appear like thermoregulation, as if someone or something maintains a certain temperature there. Moreover, some of these zones are completely shielded. They reflect some frequencies and absorb others, like a Faraday cage. Why build internal structures with temperature-regulating systems? Shielded compartments with energy sources. There is only one logical reason for this. Do you want to protect something? Something alive or something extremely important? At that moment, you stop perceiving it as a stone and begin to realize that you are looking at a ship. We began to compare these structures with what we create ourselves. Underground bunkers, prototypes of bases on Mars, and you know what? It's frighteningly familiar. Some compartments have a hexagonal shape, maximum strength with minimal weight. We apply the same principle in the Starship. Other structures are created according to the rules of the golden section. These are not alien ideas, but a perfectly reasonable approach to engineering. A researcher from Yekaterinburg proposed a theory that seems most substantiated to me. This is not just a ship, but a lifeboat. An arch, a fragment of something much larger that has been destroyed. A ship sent not for scientific research but for escape. And here arises the main question. Why is it here? Why now? Is it a coincidence or was its trajectory calculated in advance? If this is an ark meant to preserve civilization, its appearance is not just an astronomical event. It is a message, or perhaps a trial. The light of consciousness is a very rare and valuable phenomenon in the universe. And now, perhaps, another one is approaching us. We must find out. This is the most important task humanity has ever faced. For several weeks, scientific agencies argued about the name of the structure within Tri and Atlas. Some claimed it was not natural architecture, while others referred to it as a thermal anomaly with geometric resonance. But what no one wants to talk about publicly, at least for now, is what this object might actually be. Evidence of extraterrestrial engineering. The very term still raises doubts in mainstream scientific circles. However, with each passing hour, more data arrives, and each new scan confirms the same thought. This object is not random. Its elements have been carefully placed, aligned, and adjusted. Whether active or inactive, it does not simply pass through our system. He reveals himself. While 3 and the Atlas continues its silent journey, the government rushes to set priorities for observation. Military satellites capture him. Communication networks are negotiating. Behind closed doors, the tone of conversations changed. Such a shift occurs when the undeniable becomes obvious. Because if what we see is a structure resembling a city, frozen in time, then it is no longer just a scientific discovery. It is a civilization-scale event. With the spread of images among international observatories, interesting patterns began to emerge, not in the objects themselves, but in the behavior of the observers. Some prominent astrophysicists flatly refused to provide any comments. Others tried to express themselves vaguely, calling the structure unexpected, unprecedented, or worse, statistically unlikely. Behind these carefully chosen words lay fear, not of the object itself, but of what its recognition might mean. To acknowledge that we have just received an image of architecture resembling a city within an interstellar object would mean shattering centuries of scientific consensus. This meant that life, rational, architectural, technologically advanced, existed not only beyond our planet but could once have been mobile, exploratory, and perhaps even desperate. This life could leave behind artifacts meant to outlive their creators. Instead of confronting this grand reality, the scientific community found itself in a state of oscillation, and in this uncertainty, the mystery deepened further into shadow. However, not everyone preferred silence. In a step that shocked the global astronomical community, a coalition of American and European defense satellites shifted their focus to 3 and Atlas. These devices were unusual telescopes equipped with thermal imaging systems, tracking radio frequencies and monitoring deep space interference, usually used for espionage operations or missile defense. So why aim such sensitive equipment at A? At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary comet. The answer perhaps lay in the fact that they noticed what had escaped our view. Rumors began to leak from these agencies that the object was not just structured, but was moving slowly along an abnormal trajectory. Some of its thermal zones flickered at fixed intervals, and gravitational disturbances indicated a redistribution of mass within the core, as if mechanisms deep inside were rearranging. And this was the coldest soul of the leak of all. A weak, rhythmic pulse, not radio-based but gravitational, as if something inside used gravity for communication. Suddenly, the military began to monitor the object with particular attention, tracking the device. At a confidential roundtable with astrophysicists and artificial intelligence experts, data on EBA was uploaded into a high-resolution spatial interpreter. It was an artificial intelligence model designed to reconstruct three-dimensional structures based on multispectral scans. The results were stunning. The model not only created a layout but a complete architectural map. Several levels of transit corridors, heat exchange systems, energy nodes, and even what could be mistaken for storage rooms or isolation chambers. The artificial intelligence, without bias, simply followed the data. What emerged resembled a self-sufficient biosphere, a ship designed for transporting either organic life or highly advanced systems across immeasurable distances. And here's the catch. A scientist analyzing the configuration and orientation of the corridors noticed that such a structure is unsuitable for human physiology. The turns were too sharp, and the vertical distances were too narrow. To move within this space, it was not designed for our needs. Perhaps it didn't even use legs. With the revelation that reached the highest scientific and military circles, a deeper discussion began. Is the 3 and Atlas a graveyard of a lost ship, stranded in time? Or was this message deliberately sent towards intelligent beings? Some believe that its precision indicates intentionality, as no natural object behaves this way, and no dead ship would emit controlled thermal pulses or ordered gravitational echoes. However, if this is indeed a message, it gives rise to a horrifying thought. The builders intended for them to be found, or worse, presumed that someone would discover it and left something inside. Nevertheless, some urge caution, pointing out the possibility that we are not just deciphering the signal, but activating it. By scanning and observing him at such depth, we can activate systems that were meant to remain dormant, as if violating a sealed tomb that should not have been opened. While the Webb continues its observations, the question that now concerns every agency, every laboratory, and every closed research center is no longer what it is. Now it is, what will happen when it awakens? With the arrival of new data, astrophysicists begin to ask a question that once seemed absurd. Who built this? Not what, but who? The structure inside the object Tri and Atlas challenges natural processes, but not reason. Every corner, every chamber, every heat vent indicates a design, not just for survival, but for long-term planning. It was not a desperate escape capsule or a crude ark cast into space by a dying race. No. This looks like an exact, meticulously designed, modular, and potentially reproducible structure. The possibility that this object is part of a network, or perhaps even a fleet, begins to circulate among a small circle of researchers. If this structure is not unique, it means we have stumbled upon not just a relic, but a galactic infrastructure. The ruins of a civilization advanced enough to scatter artifacts across star systems. Or, worse yet, an umbrella sent in advance for observation and data collection, raising a chilling question. Who is this data intended for? Behind the scenes, the most powerful nations in the world are not standing aside. Leaks from space agencies, embassies, and even private contractors indicate that world leaders were informed, and this information triggered a quiet, yet large-scale mobilization. It is reported that the USA has redeployed 3 orbital platforms for round-the-clock surveillance of Tri and Atlas, operating 7 days a week. China has deployed a deep space tracking system based on artificial intelligence, typically used for anti-satellite operations. The European Space Agency has completely classified all data related to the object, refusing to publish even raw public reports. What is the reason for such secrecy? For the first time in history, governments face the potential existence of a non-human megastructure passing through our solar system. They do not know how to explain the situation to the public. The fear lies not only in the reality of what is happening, but also in what will happen when people take it seriously. When the idea of intelligent life becomes undeniable, when belief systems, political structures, and scientific theories face something more ancient, majestic, and technologically advanced. Amidst scientific chaos and political intrigues, something unexpected occurred. Ancient civilizations began to be perceived through a 3-dimensional model and atlas. Historians and anthropologists started to uncover frightening analogies between the geometric organization within objects and long-forgotten myths. Some star maps of indigenous peoples depict circular cities in the heavens. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of celestial chariots with central halls surrounded by 6 arches. The layout evokes unease with its proximity to 3-dimensional models of 3-dimensional space and the atlas. Even Egyptologists noted that the thermal points inside the object correspond to the golden ratio used in the construction of the pyramids. Is this a coincidence? Or could ancient civilizations have interacted, and their scribes even remembered such structures in our distant past? If so, is the 3-dimensional space an atlas of first contact or a return visit? The final act of revelation came not through conjecture, but through movement. James Webb's hypersensitive instruments, tuned to detect barely perceptible fluctuations, registered unnoticed but undeniable changes within the structure. One of the internal chambers, previously motionless, shifted by 0.2 degrees. In cosmic terms, it's insignificantly small, but in mechanical terms, it means the door shifted or the mechanism unlocked. The shift occurred during a solar flare that unleashed a stream of electromagnetic radiation on 3-dimensional space and atlas. Could this ancient structure be activated in response to solar energy? Could it be designed to activate only near a star? One of the scientists compared this to a hibernation protocol, where the object remains in a dormant state until receiving energy from a viable star system. And this viable system is us. With this tiny movement, the 3-dimensional space and atlas showed that it was not merely fossilized in flight. He reacts. He may be in hibernation, but he is not dead. When NASA, the European Commission, and even the private sector began to jointly observe 3-dimensional space and atlas, a long-forgotten document resurfaced. Declaration of Principles of the United Nations regarding actions after the discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence, developed decades ago at the dawn of the network program, outlining response protocols in case of undeniable evidence of intelligent extraterrestrial life. But here is the problem. The 3-dimensional space and atlas do not send a signal. It does not broadcast. It does not say, hello. Nevertheless, the discovery of artificial internal geometry of thermoregulation and mechanical movement compels the scientific community to rethink the concept of communication. The door moving under the influence of an impulse, a design filled with meaning. If we take this as forms of intent, then according to the protocol, we are now in contact. It is not a dialogue, but an observation. And this implies that every action we take, every signal, every attempt to deepen the research can be perceived as a response. In this ancient dialogue, we do not know who might be listening. Some scientists, frustrated by the limits of physical observation, turn to even more radical ideas. They speculate that the object may not be a home for biological life or a typical mechanism, but for a non-localized intelligence. Consciousness that is not stored in brain cells or wires, but encoded in gravitational patterns, quantum states, or even in the geometry of space. Can an object be alive, but not in a biological sense, rather in a computational or spatial way? Perhaps it is a thinking entity disguised as an object. One physicist described it as a passive algorithm encased in a comet, a cosmic sleeper waiting not for the moment to speak, but to be deciphered. And if so, we may have just connected our best telescope to the minds of aliens. We do not know which part of it we are touching. The study of the object 3 and Atlas led to a frightening realization. Its trajectory is not completely random, although it enters the solar system at an angle that excludes gravitational capture. His curved path after entry brings him closer to several key orbital zones. First, he passes by Jupiter, then finds himself near Mars, and then crosses near Earth space before continuing on his way, as if this object was collecting planetary signatures, like a drone exploring biosignals. One popular hypothesis claims that this is not just a random visitor, but a probe designed to search for planets similar to ours and, once found, transmit data. The question is whether the transfer process was initiated when this object was scanned, or if 3 and Atlas had already sent its message long before we noticed it. If it has already transmitted data, then where and to whom? And these are the most disturbing theories of all. The first thought that comes to mind is, what if 3 and Atlas was not a random object we intercepted with our telescope, but a probe designed to detect emerging civilizations at the very moment they reach a certain level of observational capabilities? In other words, he noticed us at the moment we noticed him. The powerful gaze of the James Webb Telescope likely became the trigger, a cosmic handshake. The telescope turned into a mirror, and the object blinked in response. Some people began to fear that the 3 and the outflow were never conceived as a means of communication, but rather as a tool for recording, evaluating, and signaling whether the planet's inhabitants had become noticeable, active, or potentially dangerous. Although they have no weapons yet, they can become witnesses, harbingers, and if they confirm our existence, what happens next may be completely beyond our control. We found ourselves at a pivotal moment in human history, which may later be remembered as the point when everything changed, not due to rescuers, not because of transmission, and not due to encounters with spaceships, but because of a silent structure resembling a city, frozen within stone, drifting among the stars.